And I mean that sincerely. Anyway, I thank you for accepting to do this program. You were suggested and the committee voted unanimously to have you do this program. I want you to know that. Everybody was in favor of that. So without further ado, I'm going to say, Rabbi, it's up to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation, and I especially appreciate Joe Newman's encouragement for a topic. So I had shared with our WISE agent group, must have been around Veterans Day, a little bit about my military background, and Joe said, that's it, could you please do that for us for Door to Door? So that is what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to show and tell a little bit about my career. I did bring along my boonie cap from Desert Storm. This was the hat that we wore with the uniform back in those days. It's got the Jewish chaplain's insignia on it, which is really cool. I have it also here in the pin-on form, so you may be able to see that better. It's really a cool thing. So every Jewish chaplains each have a denominationally specific insignia that they wear on their uniform. So the Muslim imams have a crescent moon, and the Buddhists have a wheel, the Christians have a cross, and this is what the Jewish chaplains wear to designate a military rabbi. And you see it has the Magen David on it, and it's got the Hebrew letters of the 10 Commandments, which are now in Hebrew letters. Back in the day when I joined, we just had, you probably can't see that, but we just had Roman numerals back then. So that was a big improvement as far as I was concerned, to move to the Hebrew letters. So those of you who have your cameras turned off, we'd love to see you if you can possibly turn them on. Also, just so you know, I'm recording this session so that those who couldn't be here for any reason have access to see it at their leisure. I'm wondering how many veterans we have on this screen right now. So Joe, yeah, so let's hear from the veterans. Joe, can you tell us a little about where and when you served?
I was in the Army from 1966 to 1968. Spent some time in after basic training. I was going to OCS.
I can't hear you, Rabbi. What
Joe,
am I doing wrong?
Joe Newman is speaking right now.
Anyway, I was going to officer candidate school for a while, but then on the PT course one day, I kind of messed my knee up and I had to drop out of that. So they assigned me to the U.S. Army Ordnance Center and School in Aberdeen Proving Ground, and then Edgewood, Maryland after that, where I spent the next 18 months analyzing tear gas, among other things. There were a few other items that I was doing in that area, and unfortunately, it was pretty well classified until Time Magazine unclassified it for me some years later. But that was pretty much where I spent my service, was in Maryland, analyzing chemicals and working with chemicals in the labs. The only good news there is I'm glad I didn't have a degree in biology, or I would have spent that time shaving goats instead. So that was no fun, because that's what they did with the biologists, because goat skin, I guess, is very similar to human skin in porosity, and so when they wanted to run some tests on something other than a human, they either used a pig or a goat, but the goats had to be shaved first, which was no fun. They weren't happy about it. But that's it for me.
Thanks. And Dennis, I think I saw your hand up. You probably have to unmute. Mark, Mark, you'll be next. Let's see if we can get Dennis.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I was in the Naval Air Reserve from 1963 to 1969. stationed out of South Weymouth Naval Air Station, where we did anti-submarine warfare exercises, facing several.
Nice. Well, thank you for your service. And Mark Gottlieb, I saw a hand up.
There. Yeah, let me know that I'm muted. I was in the California Air National Guard from 67 to 73. Did basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, and then did a 8-month technical school at Keesler Air Force Base, Biloxi, Mississippi, followed by 5 years of 2 weeks during the summer and 1 weekend a month.
Working.
I was actually in a mobile communication squadron, so even though we were part of the Air Force and Air National Guard, we didn't have any planes. We just had deuce and a half trucks with communication gear on the back.
That doesn't seem quite fair.
It was fine.
Did I miss any veterans among us? No, good. Well, I appreciate your being here, and thank you for your service to our country. So I'm going to be walking you through a presentation here, just sharing a little bit about my experience. I joined the Army on May 22nd, 1978. It's a day that you become very familiar with, your pay entry basic date. So you're asked for that date again and again. And I served for 38 years. I retired in 2016. So this is a photo from early in my career. Most of my career was spent in the reserve component with many mobilizations to active duty throughout my period of service, first for Desert Storm, and then Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Noble Cause, and Operation Enduring Freedom. I joined when I was in rabbinical school in 1978. I just saw a recruiting poster that caught my eye, and I thought, wow, this sounds like an interesting opportunity. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, near what was then the U.S. Army Chaplain Center and School at Fort Hamilton on the Brooklyn side of the Verrazano Bridge. And I was always curious about it. So when I saw this recruiting poster, I thought, okay, that's great. This will give me a chance to see what it's like to be in the Army and what goes on behind that door. So I'm not sure how to manage questions. I'm thinking maybe I'll just talk for a while, and if you have a question that occurs to you, make a note, and then when I'm done, we can. I would, love to entertain any and all questions. Now, one thing you need to understand is that in order to serve as a military chaplain or a VA chaplain, for that matter, you need to have what's called ecclesiastical endorsement. That is, some recognized organization has to put its hechsher on you, as it were, has to say that you are a legitimate authorized representative of that denomination. And there are, believe it or not, over 100 endorsing agencies from some of them have 1 or 2 chaplains, and some, like the Southern Baptists, may have hundreds of military chaplains. The endorsing agency for the Jewish community is the Jewish Welfare Board, which was composed of Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox representatives. And if you think back to 1976, you will recall that there were no conservative or Orthodox women rabbis. And the board functions as a body of the whole. So for some reason, the Jewish Welfare Board endorsed me as a chaplain candidate when I presented myself in 1978. So I went off to basic training at Fort Hamilton, Fort Wadsworth, and also 10 days at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And then in 1981, when I graduated from rabbinical school, suddenly the Jewish Welfare Board had a crisis because the conservative and Orthodox representatives did not want to appear to be endorsing the concept of a female rabbi because they didn't ordain women at that time. So it kind of created a crisis for the Jewish Welfare Board and also a pause in my career, because without that endorsement, I wasn't going to have a career. It wasn't actually until about 1987 when the Army wrote to the Jewish Welfare Board and said, chaplain candidate is not a career path. And either you endorse her as a chaplain or we're processing her out of the military. And by then, the conservative movement was ordaining women. So they decided we need to figure out how we're going to process women candidates and maintain the integrity of the Jewish Welfare Board, which was so important and is so important because it's a place where all of these rabbis sit and work together with respect and harmony. And that's a rare thing in the Jewish community outside of this particular environment. So what they did was they decided, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Uh-oh. Let's see. What do I, oh, I see, I have to advance down here. I just thought I'd give you a different picture to look at. So what they did was they divided into 3 separate endorsing agencies, but still working together as a body of the whole. And that's how it works still today. There's a Reform, a Conservative, and an Orthodox endorsing agency, but we all work together. So here's another early photo from my career. You can see by the insignia, I was a major at this time. And there's that Jewish chaplain's insignia that I was telling you about at the top. I'm concerned if anybody else wants to join. I guess somehow maybe the screen will get my attention. This is actually at the firing range. Chaplains are considered to be non-combatants. We're not issued weapons. We have a special category in the Geneva Convention that designates us as non-combatants and therefore entitled to certain treatment if we are captured. And so we always have a chaplain assistant who travels with us and acts as our bodyguard. So here I am at the firing range. My soldiers in my unit were there to they have to annually pass a test to show that they can still hit the target. So I wasn't allowed to do that, but I was loading ammo for them. Just, it's important to be with your soldiers out and about doing whatever it is that they're doing. That's how you build the relationship and the rapport, so that when they have a family issue, a spiritual issue, something of concern, that they feel they can come to you because you've built the foundation of that relationship. This was en route to Korea. I had the opportunity in 1993 to participate in a joint exercise with the Republic of Korea forces. So we got stuck though at March Air Force Base for 9 hours with some mechanical problem with the plane. So this is just a picture hanging out there. It took actually 44 hours. I timed it from the time we left our reserve center in Arizona until we walked into Camp Humphreys in Korea. We were in transit for 44 hours, but you just go with the flow. This photo was taken at Fort Huachuca in southern Arizona. You may be familiar with it down there in Sierra Vista. You can see the date on it, 1992. So we were there just for a weekend field exercise, and Saturday night I was saying Havdalah, and one of my colleagues Southern Baptist chaplain named John South snapped this photo, and it's become somewhat of an iconic photo. If you go to the Museum of American Jewish Military History in Washington, D.C., you'll see this photo on the wall, and a little plaque acknowledging the fact that I was actually the first female rabbi to serve in the US military. And this is just another field briefing. Oh, there's Chaplain South. So that's John South. He was my mentor and colleague for many years. He and I did a joint service while we were there together. And that's one of the things I appreciated the most about the military was the opportunity to do a lot of interfaith working with chaplains of all different faiths, and also just meeting and working with soldiers, people from all different walks of life and backgrounds, very, very different from mine. So I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to Brandeis. I went to rabbinical school, and I've been a rabbi my entire life. So I've had kind of a very narrow focus of who I'm exposed to in my life, but the Army really gave me the opportunity to broaden that far and wide. This is just another picture out in the field. Those are my daughters, Jessie and Sarah. I had the opportunity, I guess it was in 1999, to be the Grand Marshal of the City of Mesa Veterans Day Parade. So the kids got to ride with me in the float in the parade. And it's nice for them to get that kind of recognition, because of course there's a lot of sacrifice that families make when they have a member who is in the service. And Jessie, when she went off to college for her first year, she went to Kenyon College in Ohio. And that's when I was offered the opportunity for the first time to go to Afghanistan for Hanukkah. And she had about 6 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks off for her winter break. And I called her up and I said, I've had this invitation, opportunity to go to Afghanistan. I'd really like to go. But if I do, then I'm going to miss virtually your entire winter break. And she said, they need you more than I do. So I always treasure that. And the kids like to play with the stuff. So I must have been packing for some adventure. And there's Sarah trying on the uniform. Oh, I see. I did get somebody's waiting. Good. And there's Jessie. And the fun thing to notice here is the matzah box in the background. My husband, David, Alav HaShalom, liked to do a lot of art, and he collected supplies for things that he, might be able to use in his artwork. So you see this box here. When I was first when I came to Arizona, I was the rabbi for 18 years of Temple Beth Shalom in the East Valley, which is a conservative synagogue. And the members of the congregation who showed up to help us schlep all of the boxes in said, we know about David, but who's this guy Art? There's all these boxes with art stuff. These are two of the young men from that congregation. My unit at that time, I was with the 164th Corps Support Group which drilled out at what's now Williams Field. And they were very nice about letting me leave on Sunday mornings. I would, go to the Army unit, then go to Sunday school, and then come back. And these were two brothers who ended up both going into the Army themselves. And there were, I think, 11 kids from that congregation who ended up going into the military. And I always thought, seeing their rabbi come once a month to religious school and fatigue might perhaps have inspired them. So this is my first trip to Iraq. I went to Iraq in 2005 for the first time for Passover. And, one thing we can be really proud of as Americans is the length that our government goes to to bring Jewish religious support to soldiers or service members in far-flung corners of the world. So typically at high holidays, at Passover and at Hanukkah, they'll put a couple of reserve rabbis, because there are not many active duty rabbis, on orders and send them around the world to bring the holiday to the troops. And the soldiers were just blown away, so appreciative that a rabbi would schlep to find them in some far-flung corner of Iraq and make a Seder. Of course, it wasn't always on the same exact date as Erev Pesach. You know, you observe it whenever the rabbi could get there, because I would do what they call fob hopping. Fob is a forward operating base. So I would fly into a place one day, have my Seder the next day, go to the next fob and travel around. So, you know, I was not unusual to do 5 or 6 Passover Seders, not the 2 that we're used to. And on Hanukkah, my joke would be, because I spent 2 tours Hanukkah in Afghanistan. The joke was, it's the 11th night of Hanukkah, it's the 15th night of Hanukkah. But what's funny about this story, I was so tired, and you could see my big smile, because I'd spent 12 days at Fort Bliss, Texas, getting ready for this mobilization. And then they put me on an airplane to go to Camp Victory in Baghdad. And the plane landed at El Asad, 200 something miles to the west. And I was about to miss the Seder. And I was so upset about it. I landed in El Asad. I had just been directed onto the wrong plane. I flew in I think a C-130 from Kuwait. And the Marines, God bless them, just put me on this plane. And you know, there were only 8 passengers and a lot of equipment. And when I landed, everybody was getting met by someone to take charge of them. And there's nobody there to meet poor Chaplain Koppell. So thank God I had a phone number. I called the phone number, and they said, Sergeant Alejos is right there. He's standing under a sign that says, you know, whatever it says. I said, I'm standing under that sign, and there's no Sergeant Alejos here. So then they start spelling Alejos for me as if I couldn't read it if the guy was standing next to me. not that big of a place. And there was a sergeant major there who saw my distress and stopped what he was doing to take charge of me. And he said, just ask them what building you need to go to, and I'll take you. And when he heard what building I had to go to, his jaw dropped, because then he put together that I had been dropped in the wrong location. And there was no flight going there till like 10 o'clock at night. And obviously I would miss the Seder. And there was, you couldn't drive because, you know, it's the middle of a combat zone. It was not safe to drive. So he found out that there was this medical evacuation helicopter that was going where I needed to go. And he begged a ride for me. And so I was able to get there even in time to take a shower, put on a clean uniform before the Seder. And this is what a Seder meal looks like in the military. And then I want you to just again appreciate all of this is supplied by your tax dollars. So little plastic Seder plate with foil packets of charoset, kosher for Passover, MREs, that's meals ready to eat, 4 juice boxes and for the 4 cups, mandarin oranges for dessert, a nice matzah cover. So they really do a great job with the supplies. This is actually at Forward Operating Base Taji, wonderful Seder that I did. And unfortunately, the generator kept going out during this Seder. So I told them that we were reenacting the plague of darkness. But everybody, you know, part of your uniform, unofficially, everybody had a little flashlight. So they were able to follow along. This is at Forward Operating Base Taji in the boneyard where they put all the captured Iraqi weapons. and I happened to be there for Mother's Day. So I took this picture, and I did not spray paint it. The soldiers like to personalize the equipment. So I found this when I took a picture, and I had it made up into a card and sent it to the kids for Mother's Day. And this is overlooking the Tigris River, just from a guard shack. And this is sitting in one of Saddam Hussein's many thrones. This is no big deal to us from Phoenix. We see these haboobs all the time, but kind of a big deal. One of my favorite all-time pictures, if you've seen one of my presentations, I always include this photo. I love this. This is at the pool at the presidential palace. Some of our fine young soldiers. But what I love about this picture is, you know, she's out laying in her bikini. She's got her weapon right there and her protective vest. So, you know, if the alert goes up, she's ready to throw on her vest and defend the headquarters. But, you know, meanwhile, she's catching a few rays there. And this is the Iraqi citizens. They were so proud at that time of the right to vote. This picture was taken at Abu Ghraib, again from that same trip in 2005. I went to visit the few, these were the only 3 Jews who were stationed working at Abu Ghraib. This was right after the international scandal of the photos that had been published from there. You're all old enough to remember that. You know, when I talk to younger people, they're really, Abu Ghraib doesn't resonate for them probably the same way it does for you. But this lady here was a sergeant major who was in charge of in-processing all of the detainees. So I loved the fact that you, as they came into the prison, the first person that they had to deal with was this nice Jewish girl. And, you know, you notice that she's got both a 9mm and her M16. So she is, this was a pretty scary, dangerous place at the time. You could not walk outside without all of your gear on, ready to go. They were getting rocketed a lot. No indoor plumbing. Everybody, military and detainees, were using porta-johns. So it was kind of a rough place. And if you look at it, you can just see how miserable the environment was. And, you know, when I came back from that trip, I remember people would ask, well, how's the morale? And you couldn't speak of it in general. It was much more specific to the location. I mean, you have people serving in this kind of intensely miserable environment. And I'm going to just show you in a minute what the presidential palace looked like, literally doing your tour of duty in a palace with marble floors and gold faucets and hand-carved, hand-painted ceilings. So a very, very different experience depending where you were. So that's the palace. So that's flying into the palace. And these were where we stayed in these modular, really, really nice housing there. And this was in Mosul, home of the prophet Jonah. This is in the province of Nineveh. This is where Jonah went to give his prophecy to the Ninevites. And again, just a small group. This was mostly medical staff here. So this was another female colonel, doctor, and her staff who were serving there. And by here, you can see I'm pretty tired of explaining about the matzah, but, you know, just traveling around Iraq. I also did many seders in Kuwait. I lost count of how many times I went to Kuwait for Passover, but a lot, like at least 3 or 4 times. So one of my favorite signs from Iraq. I don't think I put in here, but I have another photo of a sign from Afghanistan in one of the air points of departure that says, "We have many signs, please read them all." But this one, so US troops are not allowed to drink in combat at all. They get 2 beers on Super Bowl Sunday and that's it. But we always were serving with a coalition, and many of the other countries were allowed to have 2 drinks a night. So the MPs would come around at night if they saw you with a beer and check your ID, but no drinking while armed. Usually a good policy. So this is Afghanistan. Just you can kind of get a sense of the impoverished situation in which people were living and still are living. And here's one night of Hanukkah in Afghanistan. This young lady is from Phoenix, Captain Lindsay Wallace, a West Point graduate. What's so funny is the day before I was leaving to go on this trip, I came back from Florida visiting my family like on a Monday, and I was leaving Tuesday. So, you know, you've all traveled. You know what it's like when you come home. Imagine you come home from a trip and you got to repack for a trip like this to leave the next day. So I'm super busy packing, unpacking, laundry, and the phone rings. And the voice says, "So I hear you're going to Afghanistan." Yeah. My granddaughter is in Afghanistan. Could you tell her that her grandfather says hello? I'm thinking it's a big country. I dutifully write down her name
I'm watching
and her unit.
Rabbi.
And all I remembered was her first name. I had the note packed.
2 o'clock.
I fly into Kandahar, Afghanistan.
Yeah, I
They
call it.
put me in a vehicle. Yeah, whoever's on the phone, if you wouldn't mind just muting yourself. They put me in a vehicle and they said, you know, oh, there's these 2 Jewish girls. It was her and her who are are dying to meet you. They took me right to their building. This is the first person I sit down with is this young lady. We start chatting. I didn't remember her last name or her unit, but I said to her, is your name Lindsay? And she said, yes. I said, oh, your grandfather called me. He wants to send his regards. So that was a great coincidence. And this is a humanitarian mission I got to participate in. And you remember I showed you how my hat always has the Jewish chaplain's insignia on the front of it. But here they asked if I would cover that up because going into the community in Afghanistan, it didn't seem safe to go with a big giant Jewish star, you know, advertising who I was. Another favorite photo, this is at the White House with George W. And obviously I did not seat myself at the head of the table. The staff work to coordinate this visit, it was unbelievable. Every single detail was managed. And when we walked in, the table was set with place cards where they wanted us to sit, and a coaster and the glass of water was full. And I was invited. This was leaders from oppressed Jewish communities around the world. And President Bush had asked them to come to this meeting to share a little bit about the status of the Jewish communities in their countries of origin. And I was asked to give the invocation at this meeting, but I just love it because it looks for all the world like it's my staff meeting. So that's pretty funny. And my mom came down from New York. That night was the Hanukkah ball at the White House. And my husband, David, pleaded a cold. He didn't feel good. He didn't want to come. So I called my mom, who was working in bookkeeping, and whatever date it was, she's on the call. She can tell you later, whatever date it was, you know, in bookkeeping, there's the first of the month and the end of the month, and it wasn't convenient, but she decided, even though it was not convenient, she would accompany me to the White House for the Hanukkah ball. So it was lovely. So that's just a sign. And here are this is in Afghanistan. the Jewish kids that played. Dreidel was a great icebreaker because none of these people necessarily knew each other or had a relationship prior to serving together. So they didn't have a natural affinity. But if you gave them Gelt and Dreidels and they played, it broke the ice and they were able to form relationships that way. And, you know, this is just so adorable too. One of the things I did as I was traveling around was try to bring some order to the chaos among the Jewish supply closets. So they found the shofarot, and, you know, here's some cute little Jewish boys playing with the shofarot. And the religious school students at Temple Chai, by this time I was working at Temple Chai, made a Hanukkah card. So every night, every soldier got a Hanukkah card from one kid at Temple Chai. So I don't know which Andrew that was, but he said, "You're cool." And this is a random photo from Bagram Airfield in northern Afghanistan. These are French winter mountain soldiers. And we all just were enamored of their uniforms and those berets. So those were the special insignia of their unit. So these guys would go on snowshoes out into the winter to bring the fight to the enemy. I saw them walking down the street with those, we call them pizza boards because they're so big. I saw them walking down the street with those pizza boards, and I asked if they would take a picture with me. This photo is Sergeant First Class Fred Cohen. He was my chaplain assistant on one of those trips to Afghanistan, the first and only time I've had a Jewish chaplain assistant. And you know, one of the things about Jewish boys, they love to play with keffiyehs. So I don't know where we were that he crossed paths with this keffiyeh, and I took a picture of him. But we had a riotous time. It was so wonderful to have a Jewish chaplain assistant, and we got stuck in Kuwait for 3 days waiting for a flight to get into Afghanistan. We found out later that the president was in Kandahar, which is where we were supposed to go. So the airfield was just completely shut down. But they don't tell you that. They just tell you every day, come to the desk and ask, no flights, no flights, no flights, no flights. So finally, being a colonel, I said, well, if we can't get into Bagram, can we get into Kandahar? At least we'll be in the right country. So we did that. We flew to Kandahar, and then as a bonus got to do some Hanukkah programming there. And from there, we figured out how to get up to Bagram, where we were supposed to be. He and I would do a Hanukkah program every night for an hour and then sit around. We had really nice quarters where we had like a meeting space. And we would sit with these soldiers till 11, 12 o'clock at night and just tell stories and jokes and laugh and bond. And one of the most touching things that any soldier ever said to me was there was that guy, in fact, who was holding the "You're Cool" card, said, you know, his soldiers asked him, how come you go there every night? What do you do? He said, well, you know, we sing and we laugh and we tell jokes and stories. And they said, well, but you could do that with us. Why do you go there every night? He said, well, there they get my jokes. And he said, I didn't realize how much I was longing to connect with my people. And that was it. That's what the whole joy of the job of the Jewish chaplain is, to help Jewish personnel in these far-flung corners away from a community to connect. And here's I want to make sure we have time for questions. So this is obviously in Kuwait. This is the emirs of Kuwait, who I'm sure would be delighted to know we were conducting a Passover Seder under their watch.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, this is not a great photo, but I love it because you could just see how much fun I'm having. And this was an award I received from the Respect for Law Alliance. I don't know how they came to me, but that was kind of fun. This was another career highlight. This photo and one of the Afghanistan Hanukkah photos are in The Women's Memorial, if you go to Arlington National Cemetery, there's a Women's Memorial there, and they have a display about women in the chaplain corps. So this is me and my colleague chaplain, Christy Moeller. So we were the two highest ranking female chaplains at the time. And we were at an event with General Dunwoody, who was the first 4-star female general. So we had the opportunity to offer a blessing for her, and that was incredibly cool. So this was my staff at one of my units in Mountain View, California. And this is when I was leaving that Mountain View, I received a Legion of Merit from my commanding general there. One of the other amazing, amazing career highlights was the opportunity to attend the U.S. Army War College, where I got a Master of Strategic Studies degree. And this is just some of the topics that we had the chance to study. So I just thought you might be interested to see what the curriculum, that was a 2-year program of study that was unbelievably demanding. We started off with, I think, 450 students and about 350 graduated. So there was a tremendous, tremendous attrition rate. So I'm really proud of having made that accomplishment, because first of all, it's a very competitive process to be selected for the War College. Very few chaplains get to attend. You know, I'm probably one of 2 or 3 rabbis who has ever had that opportunity, and it was hard. It was a lot harder than rabbinical school, and it was hard because these are all topics that I don't have a natural affinity or knowledge of. You know, when I went to rabbinical school, it was because I was interested in Judaism. I wasn't necessarily interested in these topics, but you know, got through it anyway. So this is at the War College, and you see the print behind me. Many of you have seen this in many previous Zooms. It's a print of this painting. The custom is that the graduating class makes a gift of a painting to the War College. And this was our class gift. It was the 150th anniversary of Gettysburg. And we actually toured the battlefield and stood at this place, the turning point in the war. So I got a copy of that print, and that's the original. And there's just a generic shot. So this is what I'm doing now. I retired, as I said, in 2016, but this is a group of military chaplains and also members of that Jewish Welfare Board endorsing agency that I started off by telling you about. So for a number of years, I served on the Reform Movement delegation, and then I chaired the Reform Movement delegation. And then right now I'm the chair of the plenum. So I still do some significant volunteer work, setting policy and just managing issues that come up with our chaplains. And then just the last recent thing that occurred was I had the honor to be inducted into the Army Women's Foundation Hall of Fame. And I got this cool medal. And that's that. So we say in the Army, subject to your questions, this concludes my portion of the brief. So I'm very excited to share that with you, and thank you for your interest. And let's see, how are we going to go about managing some questions? I'll go back to the gallery view.
I have a statement to make to you.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
I don't know how long I've known you, but it's a good number of years. And we've had you for Door to Door before, where you came in your beautiful white uniform. Remember? Anyway, that was sensational. But you know, the mind is quick to forget. And I honestly have forgotten a lot of the things that you brought up today, except one. I was so impressed, and I still am impressed, with you going to Iraq for that Seder. You know, that wasn't exactly going to another temple. And The conditions had to be very difficult for you, and yet you conducted that Seder in your usual wonderful manner. And for that, I was impressed, and I still thank you for your service.
You know, I appreciate that, Arnie, and I have to tell you that it was such a joy and such an honor. And all I could think of when I got the invitation to go, and again, it's all about the family support. You know, I got the call, would you like to go, in January 2005? And I was so excited, said, you know, let me check with my husband. And the first thing I did was call, and immediately, of course you should go. And congregants took the family in to have Seder. Actually, I had a congregant at the time who was in the Air National Guard. So he was very, very sensitive about my being in the military and wanting to have his family be able to support my family in that way. But what I wanted to say, Arnie, is that all I could think of when I got that call was, I bet there are dozens and dozens of rabbis in this country who wish they could go have this experience right now. And I'm the blessed one who, because I had put in all of those years of training, had the opportunity to actually do it. So I'll tell you, I would go again right now if they would ask.
There might have been dozens and dozens, but I think it's a biblical phrase, a rabbi, you excel them all.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a comment or statement or question?
Well, I have a comment. When I better on, I don't know if I'm.
No, you're great, Willa.
Okay, I just have a comment. A good number of years ago, Marty and I were in Washington, D.C., walking along, looking, I don't even remember where we were going, but we saw a sign that said the Military Museum. And we walked down that street and went in and looked around. And there we saw the picture of Rabbi Koppell. It was really exciting. It was exciting.
Rabbi, it's Barbara Mark Dreyfus.
Hi, Barbara.
I just want to thank you for your courage and your enthusiasm. It's just wonderful. And I wanted to tell you that I've talked to you before about my grandson, the chaplain in Maryland. He has been at the Capitol since January 6th. And so, you know, I know the courage that it takes to do what you have to do, whether it's local or overseas. And you inspire me to be on the positive side.
Barbara, ask him. I'm sure he'll say the exact same thing, that he is tremendously excited and honored to be the one who gets to be there. And if you look on my Facebook, I posted there was a Havdalah ceremony that the Jewish chaplains led last Saturday night at the Capitol, and I thought the Jewish National Guard rabbis convened a Havdalah service. I thought that was awesome.
Well, if that's it, we'll say thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Great to
Thank you
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all for coming. I hope you get your vaccines soon.
Yeah.
I encourage everybody to get a vaccine. Laurel and I had ours yesterday, but I will tell you this, don't give up on getting an appointment. Keep after it, be patient, and you will get one. Laura worked on this for a solid week, and then finally along came some times, and we rushed out there, had our vaccination, and now we await the second one.
The second one.
Don't lose your patience.
Don't lose your
Rabbi
patience.
Koppell, again,